gathered around her little white casket, wrote little notes on her casket, sorry, this because it did ping and it went off and you got caught.
No. He's obviously the person who behind the cover up.
Yes.
Dismembered, decapitated. Probably because you're trying to hide something and make sure certain details don't come out.
Show cans of soup were found with holes in the lids.
Hey guys, welcome back. For those of you who are new here, my name is Elise, and this is my channel, 10 to Life, where we talk all things true crime related, past cases, current cases, controversial cases. We talk about it all. So if you are brand new here, thank you for stopping by, and for my regular 10 to Lifers, welcome back. Before we jump into today's case, I have to give a quick shout out to Josh over at the Dad's Challenge podcast, because if you're watching right now, you see this brand new piece of equipment in front of me. Josh really helped me out, told me what mic I needed to get, how to tweak my audio settings, and make sure I could get rid of that dreaded echo that I'm sure so many of you guys have heard ever since I've been recording in this new space. So now we are echo-free, thanks to Josh. Thank you very much, I appreciate it. We are going to be talking about an ongoing case today, the Suzanne Morphew and Barry Morphew case. And before we get into it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button below to show support for the channel, and like, comment, share this video where you can. Now, when I first heard about this case, I felt like it was very reminiscent of the Scott Peterson case, which I know all of you guys are super familiar with. And if you're not, you need to look into it because you've been living under a rock. But there are a lot of similarities in this case, and new details are coming out weekly. There's an alleged mistress, which we know in Scott's case, it turned out to be valid, and he did have a mistress. There's a crime scene cover-up, all different things to where it just feels like it's kind of like deja vu in a sense, all over again. So it was really fascinating. But we're going to be talking about that case and what's really taken place start to finish since the beginning, which not finished because it's still ongoing, as I mentioned, but to where we are today. And as of yesterday, Suzanne's older brother, Andy, has spearheaded and organized a search party and search effort in Colorado where she went missing. And this search is expected to go over the next 6 days and really cover all different areas. He has said that he wants to enlist as many volunteers as possible to search mountains, caves, the ocean, the water, everywhere he possibly can to find evidence, to find hopefully Suzanne, and any leads that can really help us figure out what happened to her that day she went missing just a few short months ago. So in order to talk about where we're at currently in the case, we have to go back to the beginning. So let's rewind to May 2020, just a couple of months ago. On May 10th, 2020, just a couple of months ago, 49-year-old Suzanne Morphew was reported missing. It was Mother's Day, Sunday, May 10th. She had gone out for a solo bike ride and never returned home. At the time, her daughters Mallory and Macy were away camping with friends. Her husband was out of town, and friends had been trying to get in touch with her that day. No luck, so they ended up calling one of Suzanne's neighbors, who ultimately ended up calling the police and reporting her as missing. Right out of the gate, this case immediately received a lot of media attention, and there was a lot of speculation. As I mentioned, Suzanne's husband Barry was out of town that weekend when Suzanne went missing, and there were a lot of conflicting reports as to where Barry was. There were reports that he was away at a firefighter training camp. There were reports that he was away at a construction site in Denver. No real concrete alibi or sequence of events for his whereabouts that weekend were immediately revealed. It also was fascinating that he refused to do a polygraph. Now, we've seen this in several cases, and there's a lot of mixed opinions out there that if somebody refuses a polygraph, they're guilty, or they are innocent, they just don't want to get caught up because maybe if they're nervous, it could sway the test results one way or another. It, of course, immediately made people suspicious that he wouldn't take this, but other people on the other side of the argument were saying, no, he's just being smart. He doesn't want to get caught in something to where he looks guilty. If he's not, he would rather just work with the police and cooperate and show that his innocence is proven without this polygraph. So as I mentioned, right out of the gate, there was a lot of conflicting reports about Barry's whereabouts. There were the reports that he was away on that firefighter training camp, reports that he was at a site in Denver, and we really didn't get a solid timeline of events for that weekend until more details in the case started to emerge. And pretty early on, there was suspicion of an alleged mistress, and this mistress name is Morgan, and she is a landscaper, works with Barry. Now, she didn't have a comment for a very long time. Recently, Morgan spoke out and she gave her statement, and she was very adamant that she is not the other woman, that there is absolutely zero romantic relationship between she and Barry. But what's interesting is she did share certain events that took place that weekend and interesting behaviors that Barry was showing her and experiencing and exuding, to where it makes everything feel a little uncomfy, a little questionable. And that statement also ties in directly with another statement that was made by a colleague named Jeff, another colleague of Barry's, who was also involved in this story and work site that Barry had concocted or gone to work on that weekend. So let's jump right into those statements, because I feel as though that is going to paint a very clear picture and the most accurate picture of what we know as of now could have possibly taken place that weekend. In Morgan's statement, when she was adamant saying, "I'm not the other woman, I'm just a woman who works with Barry, it's not me, I'm not having an affair," she also said, "I'm scared of Barry. I don't ever want to talk to Barry again," which is very interesting because they did have a working relationship. Now, she outlines what happened that weekend, and from her point of view, of course, and what she felt like seemed a little off and a little unlike Barry's normal behavior because she had worked with him in the past. And she says that on Friday, May 8th, now remember, Suzanne went missing on Sunday, May 10th, Mother's Day. She says that on May 8th, she had worked on a beach construction site with Barry close to Maysville, which is reportedly also the same site that investigators searched early on in the case, where they didn't find any evidence to Suzanne's disappearance. Well, on Saturday, while they were working at this site, Barry had asked Morgan to clean it up, rake it out so that it looked more like beach sand and not just muck, but she said that Barry was acting very strangely. She said he was acting very out of the ordinary. She asked him what's up. He seemed stressed. He definitely seemed weird on Saturday, is what she said, which was one day before Suzanne disappeared. Also, what's very interesting is that Saturday, Morgan had agreed to work the entire day. However, Barry dismissed her at just 11 a.m., and he told her that he had to go and do some sort of activity with his wife, hiking, spend time with her. But then Morgan found out later that he had been in town all day, never actually going and doing those activities with his wife, although he had already dismissed Morgan from work early because that's what he was planning to do. The following day, Sunday, May 10th, the day Suzanne went missing, Morgan says she receives a phone call from Barry and asks her to come and assist on a project with him at a site that's over 150 miles away. Now, this project was to build some sort of retaining wall, and Morgan thought that it was just going to be she and Barry working on this site. However, he also enlisted the help of another colleague of his named Jeff. Morgan also said, and I quote, that Barry sounded extremely panicked and very unlike himself in that phone call. So Morgan and this other contractor, Jeff, drive to this site 150 miles away, but late Sunday evening, before they even arrive, they get a phone call from Barry, and Barry says that he has a family emergency, he has to leave, but that he left all of the tools for them to go work on the site and that he would be in touch with them soon. He said he was getting the site ready for them all day and had been working on it so that to grab the tools that he had left, to grab what the equipment they needed, and to go ahead and work on the site. Morgan and Jeff arrive to the Holiday Inn, which Barry had advised them to stay in, and this is in that town 150 miles away, almost 3 hours away from the home that Barry and Suzanne share in Maysville, Colorado. They arrive, Barry had checked out in a hurry because remember, he said he had that family emergency, so they didn't even see him when they arrived. But what's interesting is what they find when they get to that hotel. Because Barry was leaving, he told Jeff, "Just stay in my vacant hotel room since I have to leave anyway, it's fine." And when Jeff walks in, he describes it as smelling like chlorine, a very strong odor of chlorine, and says that there were sopping wet towels all over the floor. The bed also had the appearance of someone laying on top of it, but not being freshly made, but it didn't look as though somebody had slept there, he says. And in Jeff's statement, he says, and I quote, "I got there Sunday night and the room smelled like chlorine real bad. It was his room and he'd taken a shower. His towels were all over the floor. And the smell was reportedly so strong that it made Morgan's eyes water when she walked into the room." Later on in the investigation, Barry says that he smelled the chlorine as well in the room and that it could have been because the hotel washed their towels or sheets with chlorine or because of the pool. But the hotel later confirmed that because of COVID, the pool had been closed for a very long time, so that wasn't possible. The hotel has also given footage to the investigators from all of their footage on the 9th, the day before Suzanne was reported missing. Now, in this interview, Jeff says that he was summoned to that hotel room and that job site by Barry. He says that he had found signs that the room had been used to some capacity, but it didn't appear as though Barry had stayed the night. The bed hadn't been slept in or laid in. It kind of just looked as though somebody took a shower, laid on the bed, and then left in a hurry. He also said that he discovered a pile of mail, and in that mail in the hotel room was also a letter about property insurance, which is really weird because, and he turned that over to the FBI, but it's really weird because on what business trip do you ever, first of all, bring a stack of mail with you, but also bring a letter that is related to insurance property? It just doesn't make sense. And it seems a little fishy in my opinion. Jeff goes on to say that despite going there, driving this journey to go to this job site to work, he spent 2 days there without ever seeing the job site, that he didn't have the necessary tools as though Barry had promised they would, and Morgan had said that it looked as though he had emptied out his truck and that there were all kinds of stuff that they had there, but none of it that they actually needed. So they never even worked on this site. So tell me, how were they supposed to get this job done if they didn't have the necessary tools? Was this an oversight and maybe Barry was in such a panic that he packed up the tools that he was supposed to leave? Or were there never any tools there to begin with? On Monday morning, the day after Suzanne went missing, Morgan and Jeff are still in this town trying to work on this site or see when the tools are going to arrive, because Barry then said he would be sending them the tools, which, spoiler alert, he never did and they never arrived. But Morgan receives a phone call from Barry that Monday morning, and he says to her that Suzanne has been attacked by a mountain lion, that she's missing, that it must have been a mountain lion who's got her. Very odd. In that call, Barry also says more material is on the way and those tools are on the way, which never arrived. So they ended up leaving the following day on Tuesday because they didn't have the tools. They couldn't work on the site. It seemed as though this was all kind of a ruse to create an alibi, in my opinion. And so they leave on Tuesday because they weren't even able to get their work done. In this interview that Morgan did, she claimed that 2 unidentified men approached her in Salida, Colorado, which is near Maysville, which is where, everybody resides and the root of this story takes place, and that they were intimidating her. She says that they were discouraging her to talk to police and that they said they would pay her paycheck, but that they didn't want people to misconstrue it as hush money. Now, I find that very interesting because if there isn't some ulterior motive happening or some degree of shadiness, why would, first of all, 2 unidentified men approach somebody, which is scary in itself, but also why would they say, oh, no, we can't give you your paycheck because we don't want it to look like hush money? What are you talking about? They also tell her you have rights and you don't have to give the CBI your phone. That is alarming because now not only are they discouraging her from talking to police, but they're also saying, hey, you don't have to give up your phone if you don't want to. Hang on to that. Seems again a little suspicious in my opinion. Morgan goes on to say, I did give the police my phone. I also did 5 interviews with them, and then Barry fired her via text message. And she says that he fired her because she gave up her phone and because she was cooperating with CBI and that he was upset about it. And then she says to another news outlet, and I quote, I feel like if he was innocent, he would have talked to me. I worked with him every day for a long time. So they had this long working history together, yet he is firing her through text message. He's not talking to her. What's up? Why are you acting so shifty? It doesn't make any sense, especially if you already have built a relationship with this person, professionally, of course. You would just, ghost them? I don't understand. Especially because they're cooperating with the police in the investigation to your missing wife, who you claim to love so much. How is that at all normal behavior? After these interviews surfaced with Jeff and Morgan, Barry tried to discredit them at all costs. He said, Jeff's been in prison for 9 years. He's a shady guy. Morgan's a meth head. You can't believe anything she says. Trying to just basically bash these people and say that they're horrible people, they can't be trusted. And then when asked, okay, well then why did you hire Jeff for this job in Bloomsfield this weekend? His response was that, I needed a guy, I wanted to give him a chance, so I called him. I said I'd pay you good money, I have an opportunity for you. And for me, I took that as he's trying to deflect and not only say, these two people have a bad rap and they can't be trusted, and the only reason I even hired him was because I was trying to give him an opportunity and help him out, to make it look as though he's the good guy who was just trying to give a handout and do a favor to this guy who had such a tough life and unfortunate circumstances. I personally am not buying it, and I feel like it's one more misstep in his effort to get the public's opinion to side with him and think that he is this grandstanding man. And Jeff says this wasn't a last-minute job. This had been a job that was actually in the works for months. So again, that statement doesn't quite add up, Barry, does it? While speaking out on this, Barry also says, Morgan's only speaking negatively about me because I fired her and she's mad. So they're both upset and they're not going to say anything good about me. Again, making it about him and saying that they're just upset over being fired. Again, just deflecting entirely. And if these people are so bad, if they have such a bad history, if they can't be trusted, if you don't agree with their behavior, why'd you hire them, Barry? Why'd you hire them to begin with? And why did you have a long working history with people who you are saying are so tough to work with and so untrustworthy? Now, the precise timeline of Barry's whereabouts that weekend are still unclear. However, it does look as though he went to that job site ahead of the contractors and then rushed home in a hurry when he had a family emergency, like he had stated. But then we see all of the pieces of evidence that were left behind and the inconsistencies in his story along the way that don't match up to what his colleagues said they heard and what they saw. So it just, in my opinion, seems like there's something up. What he actually did on that trip is still unclear. Now, as I mentioned earlier, when he made that phone call to Morgan that Monday after Suzanne went missing, he had said that she was attacked by a mountain lion. And this is a theory that he has been trying to push and float around out there now for some time. He also is coming down on the investigators, saying that they botched the investigation, that they're not doing their jobs, and he keeps pushing this narrative that she was attacked by a mountain lion on that solo bike ride that day. And his exact theory is that she was riding her bike, she was attacked by that mountain lion, and then she drove off of the edge of a mountain or the edge of a hill. I mean, that's a pretty elaborate story to tell, especially if you have no real knowledge of what took place during that bike ride. I just can't help but wonder, I mean, if roles were reversed and if I had just found out and been notified that my spouse was missing, I don't know that I would jump to the conclusions that they were attacked by a mountain lion, that they drove over the edge of a mountain. My first inclination would be, oh my God, maybe they fell on their bike and they skinned their knee, or they broke their leg and they can't, leave and come for help. Maybe the bike is damaged and they can't ride. Maybe their phone when they fell flew and that's why they haven't called anybody. I don't know that I would jump to, they must have been attacked by a mountain lion and then drove over the cliff of the edge of the mountain, and that's what happened. It's just so far-fetched to me. And again, that's just my opinion. It just seems like such an elaborate story to be told when you really have no idea what took place on that mountain, allegedly. And Suzanne's brother Andy does not believe this mountain lion story for a second. He says there was absolutely no blood evidence, no tracks on the ground, no scent from an animal, and he says, my gut feeling is that there was foul play involved in her disappearance. And he says that when he went to that location in which she was riding her bike, he stood there, he realized that nobody had rode their bike over the edge. He says there would have been signs of a struggle and somebody being skinned up, and he is just not sold on this theory that Barry is pushing out there so hard. Also, when investigators searched that area, they say that they found the bike, but no evidence that Suzanne had been there. And in fact, they say that the bicycle was not ridden over a hill, but that it had been placed there by human hands. Now, that got me thinking, because I can't help but wonder, hearing that, did they retrieve some sort of evidence that there were possibly palm prints on the bar of the bicycle? You know, the bar that goes across where the two wheels are connected, whatever that's called. Or fingerprints to where it shows that somebody had picked it up and placed it. They didn't release the details as to how they came to this conclusion that it was actually placed there by human hands, but I would imagine we'll hear more of that in the coming future. But I thought that that was very interesting that they already released that information and said with conviction that there was no indication that the bike was even ridden. It looks as though where they discovered it, it was placed by human hands. Another piece of information that came out through all of this that is a little suspect as well is that the FBI asked Suzanne's brother Andy why there were no coolers in the family home. And Andy said, I don't know, because Barry's a hunter. They always would go camping. I'm sure they certainly own coolers. That seems very odd. So then I started thinking, okay, why wouldn't there be coolers in the house? Would he have maybe packed them up and taken them with him on that journey to the construction site 150 miles away, and he needed to either bring food, water, supplies, and then maybe since he was in such a hurry, he didn't bring them back with him? Or did he go on a long journey into the mountains for a couple days and he needed supplies and water and food? I don't know, but it does seem highly suspicious, again, in my opinion. One of the most damning pieces of evidence and information that has been released since all of this first began and everything's been starting to unravel and uncover is that Andy was told that the Morphew family home reeked of chlorine as well. That same smell that Jeff and Morgan smelled in that hotel room that Barry had checked out of. Now, when you think about that, I understand coincidences happen. I understand that sometimes you can't explain the unexplainable. I get it. I find it highly suspicious that two separate places in which Barry was within that small finite window of time both smell like chlorine and a strong stench of a cleaning odor. Now, why would that be unless something was being cleaned, unless something was being covered up, unless something was being hidden? Because remember, Barry tried to explain it away at the hotel saying, oh, well, maybe the hotel cleans their linens or their towels with chlorine, or maybe it's from the pool. But they said, no, we don't use that to clean anything, and the pool was closed because of COVID. So what's your reasoning as for why your home smells like that, Barry? I'm curious. Now you have all of these different pieces of evidence coming into play, and I should say pieces of speculation. You have this grandiose concocted mountain lion story. You have two different points within of location, the hotel and the home, that smell like chlorine. You have Barry refusing to take a polygraph. You have Barry now trying to discredit and defame his employees who were just cooperating with the investigation, and now he's trying to attack them and discredit them. You have people trying to quiet down Morgan and say, hey, you don't have to talk to the police, and you don't have to turn over your phone. Again, all of these seem a little too coincidental, in my opinion, to indicate in any way that Barry is innocent in all of this. And that's my opinion. I could be wrong. As I mentioned earlier in the video, Andy's brother is spearheading that volunteer search effort in Colorado, which began yesterday. And this is going to go over the course of 6 days. And there have been upwards of over 500 people who have already volunteered to help search the area. Hopefully we will receive updates, but he is really just looking for any sort of clue as to what happened, a piece of evidence, hopefully recovering Suzanne. And he speaks out and he gave a quote, which I want to read because for me, this really sealed for me a lot of the behaviors that we're seeing in Barry. And I'll explain why. And he says that I'm out there to find my sister. I think everybody probably knows what happened. I'm literally just there to search. I need to find her, need to bring her home, give her a proper burial and closure for my family. And I'm not about finding somebody guilty or trying to inflict punishment on anyone. That's not my job. That's law enforcement's job. And I think that's so telling because he really only cares about finding Suzanne and bringing her home and getting closure and peace with his family. Now, everything that he just stated in that statement, in my opinion, is something that Barry should have stated. Where's my wife? I just want to bring her home so we can have peace. I want closure for my daughters. She was the love of my life. I just want to know she's laid to rest peacefully so I'm not living in this state of unrest anymore. But that's not what he's saying. Instead, he is deflecting and putting it on everybody else, saying the FBI is lying, the investigators are botching the investigation, my employees are bad people, the pool is why it smelled like chlorine. It's always a them. Nothing ever not only about his own role or participation in whatever may have happened, and certainly he's not making any of this about Suzanne and finding Suzanne and bringing justice for Suzanne. It just shows in those two statements, if you look at the brother and the husband side by side, it's indicative that Barry clearly isn't portraying this loving, doting husband who is pure at heart trying to find his wife. Instead, he's trying to do anything possible to get eyes off of him. And again, that's just my opinion. So please tell me what you guys think. I'm curious to know. This is obviously an ongoing investigation. New details are emerging constantly, which I will keep you updated on. And I want to know, what do you guys think is going on? Do you think Barry is innocent? Do you think he had something to do with it? Do you think this is all just one huge misunderstanding? Comment below and let's get the conversation going. I want to hear everybody else's thoughts out there on this. If you want to stay updated and support this channel and hear about when we have new updates in this case or do live streams, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button below and like, comment, share this where you can. I appreciate you guys taking the time to listen with me today, and I hope you enjoyed the coverage and the video. Until next time, stay safe. Bye.